Hi, I'm Angel. You can call me Auntie Angel. I want to do some more recorded processing of my autism assessment process. Today is Tuesday, January 17th, and yesterday I had my final piece of the autism assessment um, portion. I believe I have upcoming now a group interview. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm still processing a lot. I had a pretty good meltdown after two appointments all day last Friday. Is it last Friday? I think it's already been a week. Yeah, a week from last Friday. Time is a little askew for me, which is regular. Um, yeah, so I think that the last time I made a video that I posted about this was after my first assessment at the autism specialists, um, and that one was fairly positive. And then, and I think it was on a Wednesday, and then a couple days later, I had two appointments at it's called GD Psych Services. It is another state funded um, uh, place. What am I looking for? I wanted to call it an institution. It is, but it's a service, a place that's providing services, psych services. I think they do counseling there, but actually I'm not sure now that I say that. What I did there was an IQ test and an EQ test, I think, although they didn't call it that. They called it a emotional evaluation. That's not quite accurate either. Anyhow, I ended up I was very stressed just doing the paperwork for the place. It triggered a lot, activated a lot of childhood trauma in me. And so I went into it with a lot of an overabundance of emotion and an awareness that that was happening, um, but seemingly an inability. I didn't figure out how to regulate. I thought I had, done some processing beforehand, tried to inform myself as much as possible about where I was going and who I was talking to, and and let them know ahead of time that I had this PTSD from dealing with institutions. But I think they're very used to that because often the people they deal with are mandated to go through these tests. So there's an air, an aspect, a flavor of the building, of the place, that has that, such as, for example, those little electronic locks on the doors, which for me remind me of being locked up as a juvenile. And so instantly, now I know those locks are more common. When I was 13, they were nowhere except for in psych wards and juvenile delinquent facilities and that sort of thing. So instantly, well, for one thing, I had an issue with the Google Maps, which is common for me and has become like a triggering thing after working for Instacart for a while. And it seems to be I'm noticing this reoccurrence of my interactions with Google being triggering. And so, despite my best attempts to not be dysregulated, by the time I arrived quite dysregulated. And then when I walked in the building, I became more dysregulated. And I was late. And when I apologized and for being late and for being dysregulated and said that I just needed a little time to calm down, the very nice woman who met me interpreted that to mean I needed some time alone. And so she left me alone in this little waiting area, which instantly triggered me even more. So I ended up going outside and trying to get a hold of myself. And then she came back outside, and I let her know that I was having a hard time, and that it was not helpful to leave me alone in that little room with the locking door and all that. It wasn't locked in. She was, I was locked out from their facility because obviously they're used to dealing with people who are dysregulated, like I said. So, anyhow, we managed to get into and through the appointment and into and through the second one, which was with another young woman. And in both cases, I cried a lot. I did a lot of shaking. I was very dysregulated. I got more and more regulated through the appointment. And in both cases, they were both like an hour to 2 hours long. I'm trying to get, I think they were about 2 hours long, both each, because I was supposed to be there at 10 a.m. I was there about 10:15, and which is right in the middle of my morning self-care routine, and I had to leave my house, closer to 9:30, and then I was still ended up taking a wrong turn, even though I had the Google Maps set right. And even though I knew pretty much right where it was, I still ended up 15 minutes late from driving in this silly set of circles, just ridiculous. So anyway, revved myself up to a dysregulated state, which is a pattern I've definitely noticed and is definitely just part of this, what led me to seek this evaluation. So I just listened to watched my own video from the first one. And in that video, I said it had been 6 months, which is what I was thinking at the time. But I've actually done the math since then, and it was about 8 months from the time. It was at the beginning of May of 2022 that I had the epiphany that I'm autistic. After, it was 20 years before that I saw myself in the Asperger's description, but didn't see that blindness that I've now come to see is a part of how autism is manifesting in me and in my mother, and how those blindnesses line up or don't. Any case, the assessments on Friday were very traumatic for me and probably for my assessors as well. I did the IQ test with sunglasses, crying, shaking, not managing myself very well. Nonetheless, got through it. I don't have any results yet, so I don't know however intelligent I get measured to be, I can guarantee I'm more intelligent than that when I have my whole brain about me and I'm not in a fight or flight mode, crying and shaking. But it was interesting to take that test in that state, because I actually think I did okay. As I mentioned, certainly not as good as I would have done if I'd had all my faculties about me. But it was sort of an interesting demonstration to myself of how well I'm able to cope, to various degrees. I also think I was deliberately trying not to mask a lot. I don't know if that's accurate. I had allowed myself to remove a lot of my mask for this assessment. So I think that made me feel a lot more vulnerable, and then heightened that sense of overwhelm, which then led to a decreased ability to manage my own emotions, regulate myself. So I did both of the assessments. They were traumatic, but we got through them. Then yesterday I did a final assessment with another person at the autism specialist place, which is a more friendly place. It's geared toward children. And again, I felt guilty for taking up her time. And I felt even guiltier when she ended up crying with me. I could feel her get entrained with me, which was a very interesting realization or epiphany amidst that very evaluation, which is about social skills and how well I read people and things. And what I realized is that unlike a lot of people with autism. Perhaps I have a hyper ability. Same with my verbal ability. A lot of people with autism um, are nonverbal, and I've had this hyper verbal quality that in some ways still hinders my ability to communicate in similar ways that being nonverbal might. So, not to the same degree, and in many ways, different ways. But I'm just still processing that and becoming aware of it, and it's interesting to me. And another way that I saw that, like hyper on the other end of the spectrum, is my social awareness and openness and a willing and ability to read other people, but in a way an insensitivity. Like I'm definitely self-absorbed, hence my YouTube channel. Now obviously there are contexts like the YouTube channel and like an assessment where I am the subject of the thing. That's not entirely accurate for this, but in this context it is. So but what I saw in our interaction and when she started crying is that I allow myself to be so open and so raw and so vulnerable and so real and so in the moment that it often draws other people into my energy, and then they can feel hurt by it because they are not as used to um, continuing on through that degree. Now, I made that generalization, and that was pretty gross because I bet that the dear woman who was assessing me is probably quite used to a high degree of trauma herself. I've no doubt of that. So, I mean, I don't think any of us humans really make it through life without some degree of trauma. I've had one friend who disagreed with me on that, but I would love to talk to him more about that and see if he still thinks that's true, because that was maybe more than 5 years ago and he's younger than me. So perhaps he sees it differently now, but perhaps not. I would pose that to you, dear YouTube viewer, is do you think that all lives have some degree of trauma? Has your life had some degree of trauma in it, regardless of what the circumstances or details have been? Or do you think some lives are notably like traumatic or have a lot of trauma and other lives don't? I definitely have had a lot of trauma in my life, and so I can see how my perspective is skewed, and I am curious about other people's perspective. Again, I will reiterate, I'm just here processing real time, out loud, unedited, and unscripted, because that's the way I fly. And yeah, I welcome your questions and comments. Do try to be kind. That's something, we're all trying to do the best with what we have from where we are. And I do believe we're all in this journey together. I've recently started a Wellness Gardener United support group, and that's giving me some new hope and new direction and new clarity, and really helping me as I process this part of my identity, this new lens on my identity called autism currently. I think, labels are just labels. And so if you're listening to this because you either have the autism label, already adopted it yourself or had it imposed on you, or are considering it, I want to reiterate that labels and stories can really help us make sense of things and help sort of put things in a context, in a compartment, so that it can get organized. And so in that way, I'm an advocate of finding labels and stories that serve us. And at the same time, they're just labels, they're just stories. They're not the totality of who we are. They're not the actuality of this existence. They're just labels that help us. I think of it like a piece of tape on a container. I do think that stories can be very helpful and labels can be very helpful in organizing our thoughts and our societies and our internal and our external struggles and systems. So that's why I'm sharing. That's why I'm diving into it myself. And yeah, thanks for being here. Do give me a subscribe or a thumbs up or something if you wouldn't mind. That would help me out a lot. And even more than that, I would really love your commentary. I would love to know how you feel or think about any of what I just said. So let me know. As always, I like to remind you that you are worthy of your own unconditional love. So I hope you're giving yourself a little more of that. Sending you a love bomb through time and space. I'm Angel and Gabrielle. To be fair, I use both of those names, and you can call me either of them. Thanks for being you. Ciao for now. Stay free.